SleepLIVE.
So chat, I want to kind of go over like all the unreleased characters that haven't been like put into the game yet. So if you guys don't know, there's a really cool command you can do right now where if you press F7, it opens up this menu, right? So you see this like console command. It's kind of similar to most like Source games, but if you do select, I think it's select underscore, no, it's select hero, hero underscore, does that work? Yes. So I did Nano there. So it's select hero, hero underscore, and then the character's name. And so I did Nano here, which is a character that hasn't been released yet. This is a character named Calico. She's a really cool character. She has a lot of really interesting mechanics. The big thing is she shoots out cats that carry people away and explode. Seems interesting. Really interesting character in terms of like the first mechanic. Second mechanic is kind of like a shiv, like slice thing. It's good for like confirming some damage. Seems like it does some slow. It says it does melee damage, so it looks like it's going to scale with a lot of melee stuff. She seems like she's going to be kind of a punchy character, thanks to that and another ability we're going to get to in a second, but really interesting character on that end. Her next move is a turret. It's a cat turret, and you have to be within like a range of it. It's a pretty big range. It used to be a lot smaller, but if you're inside this range, the cat will shoot at things, and for everything that it shoots, it gives you lifesteal. So you can kind of set up like a cat, have him lifesteal, and you just be like doing like the kind of the Abrams punch shit. Maybe throw like a little explosive cat here and there. Interesting mechanic. So she recently got a new ult, and before it just made her invisible, which it still kind of does. But cool thing about her invisibility is she could shoot out of it without it completely canceling it. But that's not all. When she's in this invisibility, she's able to spam punch like a motherfucker. Look at this. That is a lot quicker for a charge. Isn't that crazy? Just randomly getting attacked by like a Calico who's like invisible while they do that kind of shit. Insane. Would be an insane mechanic to deal with. As you can see, I'm stealing health. Do some shit like that. Be like melee life stealing the fuck out of people. So she has a lot of interesting abilities. That's kind of like a non-committal Abrams like shoulder charge, except it doesn't quite CC, but I could see it being really useful for like trying to push someone into the team. Like let's say someone's doing like a dynamo ult, maybe you could like use the cat to like throw him into the dynamo ult. Some shit like that could be really cool. Interesting character though. I love this character's design. She's kind of this like librarian lady. She has like a, usually she's supposed to have the cat on her shoulders, but it's not quite doing that right now. Interesting. Usually the cat's on her shoulders. There we go. Yeah, she usually has a cat on her shoulders. Really cool character design. I love it a lot. It's just really interesting. She uses all her moves around like shooting her cat out and like summoning her cat. I don't know. It's a really cool ability. So next character we're going to look at is Astro, or this character's actual name is Holladay. This character is very far along and has been far along for a pretty long time. Her mechanics are really interesting actually, and I find her to be probably the most complete character here. Like she doesn't really have too many bugs aside from a couple issues with her barrel that we'll get to, but she's a really interesting character. She's mostly a gun-based character, which we have a couple of with like Haze and Wraith. Really interesting characters in terms of just building mostly around your gun, which isn't that common of a thing for this game, despite it being kind of a like blend of like the shooter MOBA genre. Most of the shit is mostly about like blending your abilities and such. But let's talk about this character's abilities real quick. Her first ability is something kind of similar to Ash's Dynamite from Overwatch, where she throws out this barrel. Now this barrel, after it hits the wall, will explode, or if it hits a target too. Another thing you could do to cause this to explode is you could shoot it. As you can see, I was able to melee it. That doesn't cause it to explode. It's just a different way of like angling and stuff. So there's a lot of really interesting ways that you can mess with this. I can see this character doing some really cool big brain plays, especially with her next tool, which is a bounce pad. As you can see, this uses the old bounce pad model, and I think that's why they changed them from the bounce pads to these like wind over here, because now this character has this kind of unique identity with these bounce pads where she throws this bounce pad down, you jump, and when you hit the ground, you actually do a bunch of damage. It's a really cool like evolution of the bounce pad mechanic. I'm interested to see some of the cool stuff you could do with this kind of tool in a character's like moveset. Big thing you could actually do with the 2 and 1 is you could put a bounce pad down, and then you could drop the barrel and it will use the bounce pad and then explode. So you could get better angles and such, which could be really interesting in the laning phase. Like let's say someone's like behind cover, say like behind that like sign right there. You just drop that on them. Boom, a lot of damage. Really interesting move there. Her next move is probably my least favorite move in terms of her moveset. It's this hat toss move that reveals enemies when they're behind walls. It's kind of like a ping almost. Like it's just like a ping that damages. It's an interesting tool, but I don't see how useful it'll be. It's supposed to slow people down and kind of reveal where they are, but I don't really see how that synergizes with the rest of her tool set. It's just kind of a lame tool in my opinion, and it's not all that interesting. Maybe they could rework it. Maybe there could be like more to like it revealing through the walls or something like that. Maybe you could put some sort of effect on them. I don't know. There could be some additional stuff done to that. Now her final move is her lasso. She's able to grab people and just basically pull them. And while they're pulled, they aren't able to shoot or anything or move or anything like that. And so what you could do is you could potentially bring people towards your guardians and just do a lot of damage that way. But there's also an interesting property with this lasso move, and that's when you're on a bounce pad, it actually delays the time for them getting out of the lasso. So you're able to actually take them a pretty far distance. Overall, I find her to be a pretty interesting character. I don't know if she's gonna be quite a character I find very like fun to play, but I could see her very much being like a playstyle for people who are more like into the gun playstyle and wanna more lean into stuff from like Overwatch or something like that. Like again, she has that Ash Dynamite aspect where she has to shoot the barrel or have it like kind of hit people to explode. A lot of really interesting mechanics here. And the final character here is Mirage. Mirage does not have a model currently. If you look in the upper bit over here, you can actually see his model up there where, or am I pointing the right direction? I am not pointing the right direction. If you look over here, you can actually see like a model for him. Currently he's just an air sign, and so a lot of his like movement and stuff is kind of wacky because he's obviously a work in progress character. He used to have a model, he doesn't right now. But he has a lot of interesting moves that I find to be a pretty interesting moveset. So we're gonna be looking at an air sign, do a bunch of like tools basically. So his first move is this wind move, just a basic projectile. I believe it stuns people in the air. Yeah, it puts them in the air for a little bit, and so it's kind of like a dynamo, kind of a shock wave where you're able to kind of lift them up, get a bit of damage, and put them in a pretty bad position. And then the second move is this beetle shoot. He goes into like a really interesting shoot mode. It's not like the most interesting mechanic, but I could see some stuff being added. Wait, actually, let me check something. Each spirit, oh, okay. So you're able to actually just shoot and then take your time and lifesteal off a bunch of people with the beetles. It's a really interesting mechanic, and I can see that being pretty neat as a character design. His next move is pretty neat. It's a move that turns him into this like dust, and while he's this dust, he has a 50% evasion rate. And so that means he's able to dodge 50% of the moves that come at him, which is pretty damn insane. I can see this being a pretty interesting moveset, and I find him to be a really interesting character. And his final move is his ult, which is this projectile that you could explode manually. And so it'll keep just going forward. I think it'll actually just go through walls eventually, or it'll get stuck on a wall, kind of like 7 ult, and then you can just explode it there. Could be an interesting ult. I don't quite know what it's gonna do right now. It doesn't look like it does much damage outside of like doing bonus damage for each additional hero late hit, so it's probably gonna be something you're gonna be like in a team fight for, where you see like a group of people fighting, and you just shoot that out, explode on the group, big damage, and potentially win the team fight off that. Could be an interesting ult, but right now I can't really test it. This character is kind of a mess, and I'm not able to see like how he would do against like a group of enemies. Oh, that's big damage actually. That's not bad damage. Like taking like half of people, like the entire team's like health off of like one ult is not the worst. Especially if you're something like that hard to react to. That could be really good actually. And especially if your character is like super evasion focused and you're just able to run into like the front line and stuff, this character could be a monster. I could easily see him being like a bit of a nightmare to deal with if you're in the middle of a team fight. Because then you just get hit by one of these, boom, maybe he does a second one, with like Echo Shard. Interesting, really interesting move. Interesting little tip for people who are trying to like mess with all the characters who are in the files right now. If you do hero list, or what was it? Here we go, dump_hero names. Here you can get all the character names, and you can mess with all these characters here. So some of these are characters that haven't been added yet that I'm not gonna show in this because I think some of these characters aren't as interesting as other ones. And I mostly want to focus on the characters I find to be interesting. So the next one and final one we're actually going to deal with is Wrecker. We have the final hero I find to be at least interesting. And this hero has a lot of interesting mechanics. His big thing is actually sapping off of enemies. So he's able to sap off of creeps and then power up one of his other moves. And so he's constantly supposed to be farming and getting damage from enemies so we could potentially like do a lot of big damage. So yeah, this move. So he takes like an enemy and he builds up power for his 3. I believe it actually recharges his 3 if I'm correct. Here, let's see. Let's try to get our 3 on cooldown real quick. Oh yeah, it does. It recharges his 3 if he's able to kill one of the creeps, which is really interesting. Really interesting move here. So that's kind of his big gimmick. He has a lot of other tools too. Like he has this wrecking ball that he throws out and it has physics. It could be interesting in lane. Maybe like people who are really good at like angling stuff like this could potentially do a lot of like weird bowling tricks in the middle of lane with this character. Potentially does like big stun on enemies with throwing that out in the middle of like a team fight. Could be really interesting. But the big interesting thing I see a lot of people like hype for with this character is his 4, because his 4 is his ultimate ability where he shoots out a projectile kind of like Grey Talon, but unlike Grey Talon, he'll teleport to wherever his projectile lands, which is super cool and could be very devastating. I see this character like running around from lane to lane and just being a monster at it. Like, imagine like you're just in the middle of a team fight, this dude's like throwing out projectiles, comes in, he explodes on you, throws the wrecking ball, throws his big pile of garbage on you. Just absolutely disgusting character potentially. And I could see him being a very, very, very interesting character to a lot of people. Aside from that, that's all the characters I find to be interesting that haven't been released yet in terms of their moveset and stuff. I just want to kind of showcase them for people who haven't seen them or want to try them out. You guys know the commands now with the hero dump names and the hero select hero kind of thing. So hopefully this was helpful to you guys if you guys want to like try out some of these characters and such.